Let's kick off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn workshop. Back for our May session, which is fantastic. It's our Lunch and Learn workshops are more about that practical, call it that technical series that we're going to get into. And to all of you that can claim your CPD, please make sure you do as well. In case you're not sure who I am, my name is Paul Jantz, and we're here thanks to Hall Chadwick's Professional Partners Education and our wonderful sponsors, Profit Master Global Outsourcing, iKeep Bookkeepers, and Lloyd's Auctions. They're always fantastic people that are joining us. Now, if you're joining us for the first time and you're not quite sure about PPE or Professional Partners Education, we're just an educational platform built for you guys, being our accounting community. I know you've supported us quite a lot with our masterclasses that we've been doing over the last couple of years and these Lunch and Learn workshops. And if you've missed anything, the great part about, apart from it being free, everything that we've done over the last couple of years is also on our YouTube page. So if you have missed anything, just jump into Google, YouTube, type up Professional Partners Education, up will pop PPE TV Plus, and you will get access to everything over the last couple of years. Now, today's topic, we're going to talk about credit reporting, we're going to talk about finance, and we're going to talk about insolvency. So let me introduce you to our special guest. Firstly, from our Sydney Hall Chadwick office, I've got one of our partners there, John Vouris, and our special guest from Wardle Consulting, Chinelle Wardle. How are you both?
Good. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. I'm fantastic. I hope everyone's pumped for this session.
It's always a good one. And no, Johnny, you haven't been on these Lunch and Learns before, so it's great to have you here, mate.
I have not, but I'm looking forward to it. I don't know whether I'm pumped, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we might start with Chinelle then, so because she's pumped. So let's. What I might do, Chinelle, you might give us share a little bit about you and a little bit about Wardle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul, and thank you, John. I'm just ecstatic to be a part of this. The Hall Chadwick, obviously education's big for me. So, Paul, well done on setting up this platform. Now, with respect to myself, I come from a sort of legal, compliance, credit reporting and finance background. It's a lot to digest, and when I entered into the journey of actually setting up Wardle Consultancy, the key element of what I do is to try and re-educate people and educate people for the first time as to what and how to navigate their financial journey properly. So whether it's the lay person, mum and dad, or whether it's a director, set up a business, there's so many questions surrounding finance, and there's a real lack of education in this space. So hopefully this is where myself, my team and my firm and, the partnering companies that I do have the privilege of working with step in with their expertise to actually help and really assist people, individuals and companies. So that's a brief summary. Obviously, it's a lot more extensive and I'm sure we're going to go into it, but I'm just so very grateful to be allowed this opportunity to really shed some light on some fantastic work that all of you'll do. As well as I'm sure accountants are watching, and they do an incredible job in their space. As well as I know there's a few legal colleagues of mine joining. So I can't wait. And over to you, John.
Well said, well said, well said. And John, yeah, if you don't mind sharing, obviously one of our partners at Hall Chadwick in Sydney there. First of all, mate, probably if you can share what you do and also how you've worked with Wardle Consulting in the past.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a partner at Hall Chadwick Sydney. We've got offices all over the country, and also New York and Singapore. I'm a liquidator by trade, receiver, administrator. I've been doing it for 50 years now. I've been with this firm for 7 of the last 50 years. And touching on what we've done with Wardle is that we had an administration, a voluntary administration. The company needed some finance. We referred the matter to Chinelle and the team, and she was able to get finance. The deed of company arrangement was put to creditors, And a tick of approval was even our friends, the tax office, voted in favour of the deed of company arrangement. It saved a number of jobs. It saved the director's company, and he's out there trading and putting forward the deed of company arrangement.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. And I think just to touch on a little bit about what Chinelle said as well, I know there's a number of firms that are joining us today with team members as well. I know we always get great feedback we're sitting there in our boardroom. Again, this is all about learning. And I think, Chinelle, you mentioned it before in terms of education. And again, that's what this platform's all about. So PPE is set up for that. So it's fantastic that you guys can continue to educate everybody that's online today and watching it in replay as well, because once this goes into post-production, bang, it'll go out to line and go out to everybody in our database as well that will be always willing to go back, listen to it, because there'll be a lot of things that people may take in but may not get. So the ability is to then to obviously watch this again and then make sure everyone gets what we're talking about as well when we're talking about these three important topics. So let's get in today. Chinelle, I know you guys did a podcast very recently with yourself, John and Kathleen Vouris as well. Tell me a little bit about the podcast and why you did the podcast.
So the reason behind the podcast was simply the fact that Hall Chadwick are experts in their space. And I personally, as well as professionally, come across a lot of individuals as well as representatives such as accountants and lawyers, and they really are not in the space of insolvency. So when they are approached by the likes of the ATO, they've received a demand notice, or they've received a creditor notice where, potentially there's liquidation action at play, or they've received a sequestration order where a bunch of creditors are owed money, and they're actually at a loss. And what I found is that I deal with many accountants, and a lot of the accountants I deal with are very, very good, and they do assist companies and directors with next steps moving forward. However, when it comes to then getting into the insolvency area, a lot of accountants don't know where to turn. And the reason I actually did flag Hall Chadwick and really did, I don't know about pleading, but I did actually sort of very, very strenuously ask John and Kathleen to join me for this podcast, was simply to the fact that Hall Chadwick work with many accountants. And a lot of accountants, it's not the fact that, if they approach Hall Chadwick will take the client on completely. No. Hall Chadwick respects the relationship the accountant already has with their client. They simply help that next stage of navigation. So, with a good accountant and the likes of a good firm like Hall Chadwick, you can really navigate areas of where you're potentially insolvent and the steps to take to either prevent bankruptcy, or to actually navigate, like John said, if there's a deed of company arrangement that needs to be set up, that's not really for the accountants to do. Do you know what I mean? So the reason I actually did the podcast was to really highlight Hall Chadwick's strengths, the questions that I'm posed with on a daily occasion and reoccurrence with accountants and directors, and hopefully educate what people should be doing when they do receive notices, and who they should be calling, and really what the accountant can do. They won't lose their client by reaching out to Hall Chadwick. If anything, they'll actually help their client, and then they're a part of this lifelong journey. So that was really key. And I think I myself, John and Kathleen really did portray that in the podcast and actually shed some clear light as to where to go for help.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, well said. Because I think we can get into this situation. Certainly, I've got a lot of friends of mine that are business owners as well, and they get a DPN, and sometimes they want to bury their head in the sand as opposed to proactively dealing with it. And I think, again, this platform has been able to do this with the amount of firms that we work with, where just start talking to professionals about it. And I think that's the great message that we've also put out to a lot of the accounting firms in this network that we've created, is just have a chat to these guys, chat to John, chat to Kathleen. There's so many people here, whether it's Roberto or, you know, the likes of Andrew in Melbourne. There's so many people that they can just chat to about the options that are available, so that then it doesn't get to a stage where, you're right, they're heading down the road of a VA, or they're heading down the road of a bankruptcy, as you mentioned as well. So the sooner you take proactive action, the sooner you can get things in place.
Paul, if I could just add it in here with a real classic example. A director was served with a DPN for a substantial amount a couple of years ago. And he went to his accountant, and the accountant says, "I just appoint an administrator, and that will alleviate your personal responsibility." They went and saw a practitioner, and the practitioner said, "Yes, that is a defence, that you can do that." And he ended up putting his company in administration, and a deed of company arrangement was entered into. Unfortunately, the director had not lodged all his statements on time, and he was in effect personally liable for the tax debt, even though he appointed an administrator. So the message to the accountants is, you do your job, and let the experts do their job, because the director is looking at suing his accountant because he didn't tell him that he would be personally liable for the tax that wasn't remitted. So my message is, we're the experts because we're experts in a certain field.
Yes.
The accountants are normally general practitioners, and they're good at what they do, but don't take the risk. It's not worth it.
Yeah, spot on, and well said. You're spot on, and you're right. I'm sure you would hear it more, but I hear it as well. And it's like, you just don't provide the advice. Go and talk to one of the experts first. And that's the great thing about the HC team, I suppose. And like you mentioned, we're all around. We're now in Singapore and New York as well. That the ability to have people on tap, just to tap into and just get ideas, thoughts, ideas again, take them back to the client. Doesn't cost them anything just to have a chat. So again, we put that out. So let's talk about that for a sec. Chinelle, let's talk about director responsibilities. John's raised that really, really well there. So nice little segue into what we were going to talk about. So, you know, I sometimes feel it's pretty easy to set up a company, which we can do online. There's a lot of director responsibilities that come with that. Owners don't understand maybe their fiduciary duties as being a director.
Yeah.
Are you okay just to talk about some of those duties and maybe what has changed in your line of work as well?
Yeah, of course. So what's interesting is I'm in a very niche and unique space. So being a qualified broker, having brokers actually under my umbrella as well, and I partner with many, many brokerage firms. What I found is a lot of directors, they set up these beautiful companies, and obviously nobody sets up a business to make no money. So, you know, generally the revenue generation, you know, and the scope of work is there and everything's great. And what they tend to not do is they might be great at selling in business and building a company and getting interest. However, they don't have sometimes the skills to really read all of the fine print. So what I find, especially with directors, is they're very eager to set up contracts. They're very eager to sign for finance against the business to grow the business. But as the director, very often what they actually do is they sign director guarantors. And by doing that, if the business no longer is able to pay the loan or the finance that they've acquired, the directors are personally liable to then actually start to repay amounts owed towards the business debt. And, you know, I'm sure John can elaborate further with respect to director responsibilities and insolvency action. But what I actually find in the credit repair space, as well as the finance space, is quite often I get this phone call where they're halfway through their finance journey and they're like, oh, well, this company says I owe them this amount, but I didn't sign anything. The business took that finance, and why have I got a judgment on my credit report as a director? And I'm having to literally go back to the bare education piece where, guys, if you don't have the skills to really sign these contracts, perhaps seek legal advice. Speak to your accountant about your state of affairs before you actually sign agreements that you really don't understand. So yeah, when it comes to director responsibilities, I think nowadays there's a lot more onus for directors to take actually on the liabilities, as well as the debt. And a lot of people are missing that. In the past, you know, especially in Australia, comprehensive reporting wasn't in play. So what I mean by that is, as a consumer, as a director, if you fail to pay your obligations, you'll be hit with a default listing, and that remains for 5 years. You obviously get an inquiry if you consent for that inquiry, and that remains for 5 years. What's actually happening now is a lot more firms are comprehensively reporting. So if these firms are members of the 3 credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and Ilion, some firms actually report if you're paying on time. Now, as a director, if you signed for finance and you haven't actually read the small print, you might have actually signed up for finance under your name, not the business name, and then you've got these black marks, you know, for 24 months where you haven't been paying on time, and off the belief the business should have been paying. And it's little things like that that people are just unaware of. And then it obviously leads to a bigger issue when they can't repay, and then the likes of John's team get involved. You know, so there's a lot of responsibilities that people aren't aware of. John, do you want to add to the director's responsibilities when it comes to what you see your end?
Yeah, well, the responsibilities are outlined in the Corporations Act, and the director's responsibilities are under Section 180, 181, 182, and 183. Section 180 deals with care and diligence. Now, an example of that is when ASIC took Rodney Adler to task in the OneTel failure. The director has to act in good faith. The director must not use his position to gain an advantage, and the director must not use any information to get an advantage as well. But that the information and use of position is normally in larger types of companies. The other new section, when I say new, it's been in there for a couple of years, is phoenixing, which is governed under 558(4)(a), where the company has a large debt, normally with the tax office. They shut it down, and then they set up another company. Well, that's a criminal action, and also directors cannot allow the company to incur credit whilst insolvent, and that's governed by 558 of the Corporations Act. So that's the legal stuff. All it means is that directors have to do the right thing.
Yes,
absolutely. And just to add to the legal stuff, obviously ASIC have specific guidelines. So if you're registering yourself or a new business or trying to obtain a license, generally there's a very clear question in any application, and it's the fit and proper person test. Now, as a director, you've got an obligation of honesty, and ASIC will check. So, you can't really ignore the small print and the fine print anymore. ASIC, the ATO, all of these major government organisations have certain policies and practices in place for a reason. And anyone that you're turning to for any help, financial advice or legal advice or accountancy advice, should really know the information and really be an expert in that field. So there's no point turning to your accountant for a DOCA application. However, it's important you discuss your financial affairs with your accountant. Make sure your BAS is up to date. Are you paying your super on time? You know, have those conversations. That's their skill set. You know, speak to your legal team regarding contracts before you sign. If you don't have a legal team, get one. If you are unsure about finance options, if you're unsure about, you know, is your credit report stuffed, you know, without having to go to credit repair companies where they unfortunately charge a lot of money for their assistance, reach out to Wardle. You know, we have a multiple, you know, different partnerships with experts, you know, a part of our team to assist, so you get the right information and you're headed down the right journey, the right route, you know. So I'm so grateful for this, like I said, Paul, and thank you, because I don't think many people know where to turn.
Yeah,
That's the truth.
And I think a lot of it comes just back down to education. I think that's sometimes hard, you know, at this time of the year with a lot of accountants. Let's say, you know, we know there's obviously BAS time coming up. We know there's May 15 deadlines. We know there's our tax planning that's taking place with clients. And I think sometimes, you know, the firms don't have the capacity sometimes to just continually educate clients, but it's what's required, because you sort of mentioned it before when you're signing a personal guarantee, and sometimes you signed it and 5 years later, maybe the business hasn't worked out and they didn't get the advice, but they needed the finance. So they just signed it quickly. As opposed to getting some advice from whether it be legal or from your accountant. And therefore, you know what, one company director signs the personal guarantor, the other one doesn't. In 5 years' time, something goes wrong. And that's where, you know, we don't think, unfortunately, that 5 years, we don't think something's going to go wrong. But, you know, as I often say to a lot of people, you've got to talk about what happens when the divorce takes place and what does that look like?
Yeah.
Plan for that.
On that point, Paul, people have asked me what is a perfect structure for a company, and my advice to anyone who wants to register a company, you only need one director these days. Many years ago, you needed two, but you only need one director, and normally that director is the one that hasn't got any assets. And you've never, my comment to anyone is that, have you ever seen a bus driver with a bus with two bus drivers? You only need one. So my advice to accountants out there is try and convince your clients that the shareholders run the corporation, and you can have shareholding in a different multitude of shares and so forth. And you can even have a shareholders agreement as such, which is the flavour of the month these days. But have one director if you can.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's talk credit reporting for a sec. Always an interesting topic, I suppose. And Chinelle, you sort of raised it before. When applying for finance, a bit of a scary time if you've gone through the process, you know, post DOCA or even sort of bankruptcy. John, from let's call it a DOCA or bankruptcy point of view, is there anything that you can share on that topic when applying for that? And then we'll come to Chinelle to talk about the credit reporting and how sometimes we can work through deposits and those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, sure. Chinelle's the expert on that, but what we say to directors, look, you know, if you can, a deed of company arrangement is the best scenario. It's a grey mark against your name, but you know, if you've got circumstances which were beyond your control, you know, like an example, a major debtor of the company all of a sudden went into liquidation, and that caused a demise. I mean, if there's a substantial distribution with your creditors, well, that's a grey mark. You know, a liquidation is definitely a black mark. A black mark against your name. And also a bankruptcy is, if there's a blacker than black, well, that's a black mark against your name as well. So what you should say to the experts like Chinelle is, be upfront, tell her what has happened, give her an example or an excuse why it folded, and she'll do the work that she's very capable of doing. With a liquidation, you can have no more than two failures within seven years. And normally liquidations can be grouped. If one falls, the other falls, the other falls, for example. So ASIC may bar you from being a director. And I say may because I've seen many directors come through our office. They've had 4 or 5 liquidations and ASIC hasn't done a thing. That's a matter for ASIC. But my advice is to tell the people like Chinelle up front what happened, what was the reason, and can you help me?
Yeah, well said. Well said. And so Chinelle, let's say from applying for finance point of view, and I agree, being upfront is probably the most important thing because the more information you have, the better that you can work with. But in terms of, it was interesting to hear John talk about grey and black, and let's call it black and black, different strike points, I suppose. How will that affect someone's future ability to get finance? Let's say if they do have a 20% deposit, and they have issues on a credit report.
So what I love about Australia, I do believe Australia is very forward thinking. The amount of lenders that are willing to hear the background, the scenario, what happened to lead to the adverse effects on one's credit report has definitely just come leaps and bounds from when I first immigrated 16 years ago. There's many lenders that are willing to help overlook certain issues on the credit report from the past. However, they would need reassurance that moving forward, you're not insolvent. You're not trading insolvently. Now, I'd like to just go back and just touch on something when it came to John's DOCA example, and this is a really perfect example. When Paul, Chadwick and I were discussing this particular case, there was an external administration mark on the credit report because the company, was going through liquidation. Paul, Chadwick are involved to finalise the deed of company arrangement, which is shortened as DOCA. Now, the company, if they resolved these past issues that they had faced, and COVID played a large part of that, they would move forward trading solvently. So the DOCA was perfect, and the director had enough financial options to allow him to release finance to actually cover the DOCA agreement. In that situation, for example, Paul Chadwick finalised the DOCA, even had the ATO involved. ATO were in agreement. The DOCA finalised, funds settled, and now that particular individual does not have the external administration, as the company is now trading profitably, and they're actually in the middle of expansion. So that's a prime example where a black mark, if everything is actually done correctly, will be overcome. Okay, now when it comes to the 20% deposit, beautiful. A lot of finance providers, 20% deposit, they're covered. If anything happens and payments are breached, they've got their 20% to cover them, and they'll just take the security in question. However, just because you've got 20%, it doesn't mean and doesn't negate that you won't be paying a higher interest if you've got credit report issues. So don't ever ignore the history. Don't ignore the past. If you can resolve past issues on your credit report, it will only help you financially with a lower interest rate and a better profile. Okay, so that 1% increase because you're considered high risk because your score is low is just not worth it personally. It makes more sense to resolve and really rebuild completely, not just buy something for the sake of it because you've got 20% and then you're paying actually extortionate amounts in higher interest.
Yes, so that can actually vary per, call it individual, based on their credit risk, whether they're paying a low interest rate or a higher interest rate.
Absolutely. The lower the score, the higher the interest. The higher the score, the lower the interest.
Yep.
It makes no sense to ignore a lower score because you're only going to be saving long term.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well said. Well said. And I think, so many so many bits and pieces here, which are really important for firms online to just continually talk to their clients about, because it's really important. And I think when it comes to credit score, John, here's probably one for you, because I know I get asked this quite a lot when I talk to a lot of accounting firms, and I've got to refer back to, I'm handballing that one on to either Andrew or to Roberto in the Melbourne office. And when it comes to, let's say, a DOCA, or even when we're talking about an SBR nowadays, if someone goes through a small business restructure, is that another grey? Is it a black? How is it affected in terms of credit rating?
Well, I think it's lower than grey. If there is a colour lower than grey, maybe off-white. It's the beauty of that is that the debts are under $1 million. There's no money owed to any employees, and all the lodgements are up to date, and super is up to date. So that's a deal that can be done with creditors, and the beauty of that is that you can't do that more than once. So the company continues to trade once the deal and the payment's been made. So that I would say that's under the DOCA scenario as such, because it's a quick. What it says, it's quick. It's done. Creditors really aren't interested in a tome of information from liquidators. I mean, they're only interested in one thing. The little square thing. It used to be a check. Now they're interested in how much am I going to get and when am I going to get it.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. So Chinelle, just a quick one back to that as well, because let's talk about the different colours there, whether it's grey or a Richie Benno off-white, or let's say a black. How long would that typically be before? Is it taken off the credit report, or is it just the score, or is it harder to get finance if you're obviously a black, or is that something you see in terms of a variability, or it's just what it is?
There's no such thing as black and white with credit reporting. The time frames are black and white. So like I stated earlier, a default is listed for 5 years.
Right.
An inquiry is listed for 5 years. If you're taken to court and a judgment is awarded in the other party's favour against you, that displays in your report for 5 years. However, the reason I say, the time frames are black and white, the sequence of events to negate certain listings and to argue that they shouldn't be there is definitely grey, or the off-white, more like the duck white, or whatever that might be. The reason I say that is there's no company, including my own, that is immune to error. Life is about learning and growing, and you make errors along the way. If every company did everything perfectly, there wouldn't be the likes of the Australian Financial Complaints Authority. There wouldn't be the likes of the Royal Commission that we've all seen and heard of all over the news. I'm not a believer of helping people or companies where they fraudulently try and evade their finance obligations, and they intentionally withhold legal information, and they intentionally set up multiple companies to evade their tax obligations. I don't want any part of it, and Hall, Chadwick and all of us are very much of the same mindset. We want to assist companies and individuals trying to do the right thing, but they've fallen over.
Yep.
So when it comes to credit reporting, it's all grey. Can something be changed, amended to increase score? 100%. Only when legally justifiable. Everyone needs to comply to ASIC regulations, the NCCPA, as well as the credit reporting code. And my team and I stand fast when it comes to doing the right thing. We will only help anyone with finance or refer them to Hall, Chadwick and deal with accountants when everyone's trying to do the right thing. And if that's the case, there's always grey, always.
Okay, well said. Let's talk options. Let's talk finance options for a sec. What's available to clients that are in financial trouble, and why would they need it?
Well, I think everyone is not aware of the simple fact that they have rights. I argue everything. I live by a spreadsheet, and even if my phone bill is 2 cents incorrect, I will get on the phone and argue and get a reference number. Everyone has rights. If you are in financial hardship, if you can't afford what you've actually entered into, reach out by all means to my company. But if you're a company in distress, the first thing you should be doing is talking to your accountant. What is going on? Where is everything at? What do we need to do? Why am I getting letters from the ATO that I am behind and I owe money? If your accountant can't help you, get another accountant. If they can't help you and your business is really going under, give Chadwick a call. I mean, it's not difficult, but a lot of people don't know where to turn and what rights they have. The financial ombudsman is completely free. It's a free phone number. Call them. You can get some very, very good advice by a reputable company. The telecommunication ombudsman, free of charge. There's many companies that will give you the options and explain the rights. And if you find it hard to navigate, this is why we're having these live, lunch and learn. Reach out.
Yep.
Reach out to us.
Well said. Well said. John, anything you wish to add, mate?
No. I think Chinelle's adequately covered every part of it. And the accountants. My advice again, I stress. I mean, don't get involved in something that you don't know. It's just going to be. You might earn 1,000 or 2, but it's going to bite you in the backside later on.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So, and just on that note, something just came to mind. I had a phone call the other day. A director called. They received a legal demand notice, threatening legal action to the extreme, if you can imagine. They ended up calling their conveyancing lawyer that dealt with buying their property from 5 years ago. No. You have experts in certain areas. Calling a conveyancing lawyer if you've received a demand from somebody threatening legal action isn't the way to go. So just to stress John's point, my point, and why we're doing this is there's many experts there in their individual fields where they are able to give you that legal advice, financial advice, and they're qualified to do so.
Well said. Well said. And I think that's one of the great things that, sort of one of the strengths that Paul Chadwick has is the ability to work with so many other accounting firms to actually provide that. And I know I've set up a number of different meetings with a number of different people to just touch base, just find out what's available out there. What are the options available? And that's the great thing about, again, what we do and what we provide the industry with, which is fantastic. Now, to all of you guys online, I know we've got about 5 or 7 minutes left before we look to wrap up. If you've got any questions, can you please drop them into the Q&A, whether they're for Chinelle, whether they're for John. I'll go through those in about 5 or 7 minutes' time. Probably a big one for everyone listening as well and sort of watching this as well. I know there's people listening and watching, but let's talk about the role of the accountant in this mix. When you've engaged, let's say, you, Chinelle, at Wardle Consulting, or they've engaged Hall Chadwick, how do you see the role of the firm getting involved here?
Well, if I can answer that, I mean, once we get a referral, it's normally, hey, John, I got this client. Can you come and see him? And I travel everywhere. And all partners travel. We go and visit the client either in the accountant's office, more comfortable situation. It's that, and it may well be that we can fix the problem there and then, right? No charge. It's a call out fee, call out scenario. But not, in a major, in a large sort of scenario, we use the accountant to prepare certain documents, and we pay for that because it's cheaper for us to use the accountant because he's got all the information, he knows the scenarios, and we pay the accountant a fee. And if it goes into administration and it's a DOCA as such, once we've done it, we give it back to the accountant. That's what Chinelle was saying. We don't want the clients. We don't want your clients. We've got enough clients. And I don't deal with those clients.
And
So that's the scenario. Sorry?
I'd like to reiterate that, we worked on matters similar, that the original accountant always gets the client back. In my situation, it's critical that the accountant that I'm dealing with maintains that relationship with their client, because I might be, my team rather, because I own another company that purely helps people move past credit reporting issues. And, it's critical the accountant is communicating with my team. So we know that, okay, not lodging the BAS on time previously won't happen again. The ATO are more than happy to enter into arrangements provided the accountant uploads everything into the portal. That's not my job and that's not my team's job. We might be disputing one aspect of what's happened due to technical error, legislative error. However, the accountant needs to be doing everything they need to be doing on their portal as an accountant. So, any accountants that I deal with, and I have a lot of accountants that I deal with and partner with as well, they know that they're actually on this journey with the client, with their client, and it actually ends up being a journey with trust.
Yes.
Because all parties just want the best interests of the end party to come to fruition. Do you know what I mean?
Well
So so all the accountants out there, don't be afraid to reach out. If anything, this will actually give you more scope and more credibility because you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you're spot on. I think at the end of the day, you said the word before in terms of relationship. I think that's when you're talking about a client and the accountant, you've always got a very special relationship there. You're constantly always talking to them and making sure, and they trust you. Again, I know it's been thrown out a little bit in terms of the number one trusted advisor is the accountant. And I think the ability for a business owner to turn to the accountant and say, listen, and again, they'd know the financial situation. I'm in a bit of a pickle here. I'm in a bit of a pickle there. How can you help? Holding their hand is sometimes the key factor, and then saying, okay, let me go and check to Chinelle over there. Let me go and call in John over there. Let me pull in someone else over there. And that's a great part, that you still maintain that relationship as the accountant. And I've seen that 100 times over, but I've also seen it where they just say, oh, go and talk to so-and-so. And the client doesn't feel comfortable sometimes just going and talking, but you hold their hand, they feel a lot more comfortable.
Correct.
Yeah.
All righty. Let me just check any questions. Well, there's no questions.
I'm really pumped for questions, guys. What's going on?
You got any questions? Throw them in there, please. Throw them into Chinelle. So while we're waiting on some questions, let's call it a little bit of a wrap up. Any sort of final comments? Chinelle, where could people find you as an example?
Well, I have, if you haven't seen it already, I'm all over LinkedIn with these beautiful podcasts with all Chadwick and other, very trusted partners. You can reach out via the website, Wardle Consultancy Services, as well as the other company, Score Up, which deals with credit reporting issues. Paul, by all means, please share any information you feel necessary with any parties that have registered. I have information I can send forward as well. I just want everyone to not leave this meeting wondering where to from now. Where do I turn to 6 months from now? Where do my clients go? There's a really vast network of people that I deal with and companies. And definitely, I'm sure Hall Chadwick needs no introduction as to how they can be contacted. But by all means, there's a number of channels to get in touch with me and my company.
Well said. And I think again, Chinelle, you've got it at the bottom of your screen there in terms of how to spell Chinelle. So if it's something you wanted to reach out to, I'm assuming you're on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, it's quite a weird spelling, but yes. I'm sure everyone will see my details after this.
Yes.
But yeah, just honestly, just get into LinkedIn. You Google me. I'll give you the details, Paul, so you can share.
Good. And I know just offline before we came on live as well, you spoke about call it a framework or something that you can send out as well. So to all of you guys that are online as well, I'll reach out after this to thank you. And again, it's an opt-in. if you would like that supplied by Chinelle, I will forward that on to you. She'll send that to me straight after this session, and then I'll send it on to all of you guys as well. So again, just another little bonus for joining us today. So thank you. John, how do people find you, mate?
I'm in Sydney. I'm on LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff, but we're in Park Street, Sydney. My phone number 92632640. If you look me up and go on our page or whatever, I'm quite approachable, and I must stress there's no job too small for us to have a look at. Okay.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Just give us a call, even if it's a phone call. Look, I've got this situation, blah blah blah. I can deal with it over the phone, and no charge.
Well said, mate. Well, thank you. Thank you to both of you for being a part of today. Chinelle, I'm sorry there's not as many questions as you probably hoped for. But I'll tell you what, everything that comes through from me after I've reached out to everyone, I'll forward on to you anyway, because some people do come back to me, and I'll definitely forward on your details as well as John. So to both Chinelle and John, thank you very much for joining us as part of this special little lunch and learn workshop that we run every Tuesday, the second Tuesday of the month. So it's been wonderful to have you both here sharing your thoughts, your comments, your advice. I think it's been absolutely priceless. To all of you guys online that have joined us as well, thank you. I hope it's been of value. I hope you've been able to take something away. And if you're there with your team members as well, maybe you can start talking about the sorts of things that you can start communicating with your with your clients. And if there's things that you don't know, that's what these experts are for. So please reach out to them and talk to them about anything that you need to talk to them about. Before I wrap up, just a quick one on my next masterclass. I've been running my masterclasses now for a good part of, I think this is year 3. It is next Monday. So we've gone with Mondays. We're sort of trying to mix things up around a little bit. I think it's the 13th next Monday. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're talking about the art of decision-making, which is always a tough one for managers, for leaders of businesses. And I've got a very special guest, Jenny Junk here, joining me to talk about the art of decision-making. So if you haven't seen that invitation yet, I know I've already got I've got heaps of registrations. So if you haven't seen it, jump on my LinkedIn as well, or you'll get an invitation pretty soon again via email. And I hope you can join us for my next masterclass. I think that's about it.
Thanks,
John,
Paul. Thank you so
Chinelle,
much. And thanks, John.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Paul and
pleasure.
Chinelle. A pleasure.
Beautiful. Till I see you guys next time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.